Hey everybody. Well, on my walk around the world today and my look at Chinese locomotives, I'm going to stop in the nation of Kenya. Although Kenya actually has one of the oldest rail systems in Africa, it's finally starting to modernize, and the important part is the Mombasa to Nairobi segment of the Kenya Standard Gauge Railway. Although the line will stretch much longer and is under construction now, Mombasa to Nairobi link is important because Mombasa is Kenya's main shipping port, and Nairobi, of course, is the capital, largest city, and metropole of the country. It's about 475 kilometers to the city from Mombasa and about 600 kilometers to the inland container port. The Madaraka Express, as it's known, replaces the old and slow meter gauge railway. Under that system, the approximate transit time was about 12 hours for both passenger and freight, but after the railroad was completed, it was actually about 4 hours for passenger trains and around 5 to 6 total for freight. Construction began in October of 2016, and this segment was completed in January 2018. Construction was undertaken by the China Road and Bridge Corporation, with about 90% of the funding coming from a loan from Chinese banks and the other 10% coming from the Kenyan government. This infrastructure project was one of the most expensive in Kenya history. It cost almost $3.6 billion. 25,000 Kenyans were hired to work on this project, and full turnover to the Kenyan government happened in mid-2022. The line runs both passenger and freight service, and although COVID kind of messed with the passenger ridership to begin with, it has generally exceeded expectations thus far. Powered rolling stock began arriving in Africa in May of 2017, and they're all of Chinese make, including DF8Bs, DF11s, which I talked about in another video, and two quote-unquote shunting locomotives in the DF7G. Here's a look at one of the initial two DF7Gs delivered that summer. On a bit of a side note, I'm noticing that there is a slowly growing community of rail fans in Kenya that like to go out and photograph the trains. I'm hoping to get over there someday and do the same thing myself. So if you're a Kenyan government official watching this or someone who works with the educational system, I'd be happy to trade plenty of teaching time if I could come over and see these.
Coming from Mombasa to Nairobi.
If you've looked through my archive, you notice that I already have a video on the Dongfeng 7 series, and I showed two locomotives running from the DF7 series. So you're wondering, why don't I talk about the Dongfeng 7G there? Well, the reason why is this is kind of an odd locomotive because it's actually not necessarily an evolution of the DF7 series of locomotives. It's actually an improved DF5 locomotive, and I have a DF5, and I'll talk about that in another video. But basically what happened is the DF5 and the DF7 were produced in parallel, but the DF5 stopped and underwent some modernization changes, and it's those modernization changes that they used to develop DF7G. Effectively, the DF7G probably should have been named something else because it is in the same class as the previous DF7 series, but it is greatly improved. Like its predecessors, the DF7A through C and the DF5, it's designed primarily as a shunting locomotive, but it can be used as a road or trunk line locomotive if necessary. The main reason we see these being used as shunting locomotives, even though they look like they could handle trunk line locomotive service just like we do here in the United States, it seems that railroad philosophy in China relies on fully cowled locomotives for long-distance service. Also, it's generally prototypical behavior in China to run long hood forward, much like we did in the United States quite a while ago, but we don't really do anymore. Because of this, I'm fairly sure that the Chinese do not see these types of locomotives and this design as being suitable for long-distance use. As an interesting aside, there is an export version of this, the DF7G-C, and most of those were sent to Cuba. You can see them running around to this day, hauling both passenger and freight. There was also a version made for Mongolia as well, and I don't know if I'm going to get over there, but hopefully one of these days I can do that also. All right, well, let's take a look at our boys here and see what we've got. Line them all up. As I alluded to earlier, the build date is what's really important here if we look at the difference between the 7G, the DF5, and the DF7A through C series. The DF7G was manufactured from 2002 onwards, the DF5 from 1976 to 2006, and the DF7A through C series from 1982 to 1997. The DF7G's 2002 manufacture lines up with the third tranche of DF5s, which went till 2006. So you can see it's basically an improved DF5, not a DF7 series locomotive. The manufacturer actually is quite varied. Just like in China, a lot of factories take these on, but initially Feng and Quishan took on the DF7G, whereas Dalian and Tangshan took on the DF5, and Beijing Erqui took on the DF7, but these have been manufactured by tons of factories. The engine for the DF7G is the 12V240Z, which is the same as the older engine that was in the DF4 series. There is 8-cylinder 240 series, and again, the same 240 series engine in the A through C series. The power that each produces, DF7G produces right around 2,000 horsepower, up to 2,100 horsepower. DF5 goes to about 1,650 horsepower with its smaller engine, and the DF7 uses the same engine, but it's a little bit less powerful, topping out at around 2,000 horsepower. The weight on each is about the same for the 7s, right? It's 138 metric tons, and it's designed to go 100 kilometers per hour. The DF5 is 120 metric tons, tops out at 98.5, and again, about the same for the DF7 as the DF7G's, 135 and 100 kilometers per hour. Starting tractive effort for the DF7G is about 435 kilonewtons, and the continuous is 320 kilonewtons. DF5 is 390 kilonewtons and 280 kilonewtons continuous. And the DF7A through C series produces 428 kilonewtons to start with and has a continuous kilonewton pulling effort of 308. Well, all right. Well, why Kenya? Well, because my Chinese DF7G model is, in fact, the Kenyan version of the DF7G. In the lead up to delivery, Kenyan Railways released these renderings of the DF7Gs, the two that they were going to get in Kenyan Railway service, and they were to be used in the container port, shunting the segments of train after they were unloaded directly from the container ship. My version is made by my favorite model railroad company, Chang Ming Models, which used to be known as Charming Models. This is a limited edition designed to commemorate the DF7G being used in Kenya. The box is a little bit deceiving because it has the standard Chinese livery on it, but in fact on the inside will be the Kenyan DF7G. Now I'll admit that this is the first Chang Ming model that I've gotten where I've been really disappointed in the literature. It's just a printout here. It's just a brochure printout. And if you remember from my unboxings of the 6K and the 8K, they had wonderful literature, just absolutely top-notch literature. This is a far cry from what I normally see, but I guess in this particular case, I'm not going to begrudge them too much because this, quite simply, I think is the best model that I own, period. So I'll show it to you here, but I'm going to go ahead and pull it off of this collector stand and give you a detailed walk around. It is an absolutely beautiful, stunning model. It is plastic, but it is at least brass, if not better quality, and it comes all assembled as well. Just a stunning, stunning piece. You can see all the piping there. But let's go ahead and take a walk around this particular model. As you can see, there's no plate that covers the entire set of gears down here. They've actually modeled the traction motors, and they've done a really good job of hiding the axle that runs through all three of them. So it's really similar to a brass model in that sense, but it's even one step more evolved. The railings are actually metal, and as you can see, they actually seem like they have a weld joint between all of them. Quite impressive. And this little board here, the manufacturer's plate, it's actually a separately applied piece. And look at that, you can almost read the Chinese lettering, even though it is extremely tiny on the builder's plate, extremely tiny. And we go back here and we could look around the front. Excellent details all the way around. It looks like you could actually open everything. The hinges are really clear. Look at the actual texturing here on the foot plates. Excellent, excellent work. And other details like the driver here, who I've named Harrison. He's actually wearing the regulation uniform as required by Kenya Rail. Check that out. Even those little details are in place and awesome. You can see the molded in details behind him there by the other side of the cab. Here we go. Here's another look at that. I don't know if you can see it, but those little wire meshes around, I think that's the horn that those wire meshes are protecting. I don't know. It's so small. It's difficult to tell what it would be in real life. But again, excellent work. Utterly museum quality on this piece. The separately etched air conditioner fan. It's kind of hard to tell from this photo, but it's a separate piece that is inlaid on top of or underneath another etched grate. Here's the fan. It doesn't have the moving louvers, but I actually kind of like that because you can actually see the fan running in this particular case. Moving on to the lighting, there are several lighting options. These are the primary headlights on the locomotive. I don't know how Chinese locomotives work, so I'm just going to take it for granted that those are the actual headlights. There is another set of lights here, and all these are mimicked on the back, by the way. Not sure what these lights, I guess they'd be the equivalent of ditch lights, maybe. There is the top light. It is separately operating. If you notice, the bezel is actually metal around that light. Very impressive. And it has these red light, which I'm not sure if they're emergency lights or backup lights. I'm not entirely sure what they do. But again, all these are fully mimicked on the rear of the locomotive as well. Hopefully someday when they bring me over there, they can explain what each of the light sets are. It would be great. Go over here, and again, you can see the separately applied hoses. And the number board on these particular locomotives is on the side rear. You can see it lighting up. And on the engineer side, it also has, these are inspection lights or whatever to tell the engineer that he's actually moving. They're very dim, but I think that mimics what they would look like in real life. The actual highly detailed panel on both sides of the cab light up. These replicate the dual forward controls in the DF7G. And also the cab light flickers on and flickers to life, and it doesn't just pop on. Check this out. I might have one other cab light that does this, and I have one passenger train that does this also. The DF7Gs in Kenya were some of the first that were active because they had to start building trains in order to prepare them for the inaugural run in January 18 from Mombasa to Nairobi. In Mombasa, the DF7Gs put together the first train, and that train was eventually hauled to Nairobi using double-headed DF8B locomotives. In fact, the run is generally made with double-headed DF8B locomotives as well. Here are the double-headed DF8Bs leaving the port on their way to Nairobi on their inaugural run. This pattern's pretty much continued on, the DF7Gs handling all of the container port action. I think it's going to be a very important locomotive in Kenya for quite some time. I'm glad I was able to find these videos online because they show me exactly how much care was put into the DF7G model that I have. In fact, even the smoke really looks similar. So it's pretty neat to watch this in real life and see how closely it mimics my model. I'm going to try to model this train as closely as I can. Of course, I don't have the exact flat cars that they use here, but I'm going to give it my absolute best shot. And as an aside, my one of my 2 PhD minors is actually in African history, but I never really did a whole lot with African history directly. So I guess, in a way, this is the first thing I've really published on African history in my not-so-storied career as an academic. I'll go ahead and run my consist for you, and you can figure out how closely you think it lines up. It's not 100% perfect, and certainly don't have the Kenyan specific flat cars, but yeah, I think it looks just about like it does. So we'll start it up there. Cool smoke plume. Absolutely love it. Love this model. Love everything about it. They took real care to make sure that it mimicked the prototype as closely as they could make it, I think. So what do you think? I know a lot of people say these sound like Alcos and General Electrics, and that might make some sense. I mean, I'm not sure how much you can do to a 4-stroke engine. So they're going to sound about the same. And this is turbocharged, although you can't really hear a whole lot of turbocharged whine in this model. So anyway, there we go. Light it up. I'll actually go ahead and run this whole run through for you, and you can get a cool look at it shipping containers on the inaugural run from Mombasa to Nairobi. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know what you think. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this locomotive and what they've been doing in Kenya. And it always helps me a lot if you like, and it really helps me even more if you subscribe and hit the bell, so I'd really appreciate it. Thanks a bunch for watching. Take care. Happy model railroading. If you're from Kenya watching this, I hope it did you and your country proud. Talk to you later. See you soon.